So I had a pretty negative view of all that because I went through a nutrition program at
Hmm.
Rutgers University as an undergrad and just had like a negative view of all that. And then I got into neuroscience and then I came back around to the ketogenic diet because it worked for seizures. And I didn't even know that I'm kind of embarrassed to say I didn't know that the ketogenic diets that it was a standard of care for epilepsy when drugs failed. So the more I started investigating the ketogenic diet, and then we started using ketone esters and various forms of ketone supplementation, which we could talk about that too. I started seeing the real world benefits in our animal models. And the more I became increasingly interested in using this approach myself. So I was experimenting with the ketogenic diet, and then it kind of set off a whole cascade of self-experimentation.
Um, what do you think some of the benefits and liabilities of the ketogenic diet are, and who might it be for and who might it not be for? I think that might be a good distinction for people who might be considering it, or people who, and then we'll get into maybe some of the integration of that type of diet.
Yeah, another good question, because a lot of people think, they should be on the ketogenic diet and follow it all the time. And some of them will reference me. What they should know is that the main focus of our research is actually seizures, like developing strategies to prevent seizures, whether that be for epilepsy, genetic disorders like Kabuki syndrome or Angelman syndrome, which we have a clinical trial, evolved out of our research, and also what we call environmental physiology resilience. So being able to prevent a seizure, so you have resilience in an environment that would otherwise pose a danger to you. So, for example, in the studies that we did in our rat model of seizures, we'll pressurize to 5 atmospheres of oxygen, and that will typically trigger a seizure in about 5 to 10 minutes. But in studies that, dating back almost 10 years now, we observed that a rat could stay in this hyperbaric oxygen environment 600% longer. So we observed that being in a state of therapeutic ketosis made the brain much more resilient, and it was doing it by optimizing brain energy metabolism, but also changing the neuropharmacology of the brain and, hitting a number of other signaling pathways that we're studying now. There's still a lot of unknowns, but some things we do know, some things we don't. So that's kind of the advantage. I mean, when I started studying the ketogenic diet or ketone supplementation for seizures, I realized pretty early on, before I was even aware of Jeff Volek's work or Stephen Finney's work or other people who were using it outside of the realm of epilepsy, that there were some people who were actually using the ketogenic diet for performance. And I was vaguely familiar with it from a bodybuilding perspective in regards to ketogenic diets being used for body composition alterations, rapid fat loss, from the early days of Dan Duchaine and the
Vince
world
Gironda, way back in the day, was really using it.
Yeah, that's right.
In the Wild Physique, his high-fat cream and eggs diet, and then he'd put people 21 days on that, and then he would do 10 days of cycling on only vegetables.
That's right.
Like they would go green, so they could bring their pH back in a line. So he was very sophisticated. He'd lose a lot of glandulars. He was really, really, really ahead of his time.
Yeah, Mario Di Pasquale too.
Yes, in the anabolic diet, which got Matt turned on to the ketogenic diet 25 years ago, I think it was.
Yep. So I had a pretty negative view of all that because I went through a nutrition program at Rutgers University as an undergrad and just had like a negative view of all that. And then I got into neuroscience, and then I came back around to the ketogenic diet because it worked for seizures. And I didn't even know that. I'm kind of embarrassed to say I didn't know that the ketogenic diets, that it was a standard of care for epilepsy when drugs failed. So the more I started investigating the ketogenic diet, and then we started using ketone esters and various forms of ketone supplementation, which we could talk about that too. I started seeing the real world benefits in our animal models. And the more I became increasingly interested in using this approach myself. So I was experimenting with the ketogenic diet, and then it kind of set off a whole cascade of self-experimentation to, and following a ketogenic diet, and then later on intermittent fasting, and then prolonged fasting. I realized I didn't have to eat 6 times a day. I realized that once my body sort of transitioned away from being carbohydrate dependent, I could go quite a long time without, intense hunger. I might get a little bit hungry, but it was so much easier to power through it. And then once I kind of get through the hunger, then there was like mental clarity. I was doing all this at a time when I was in a tenure track position and really had to have a very high level of output in regards to, publications, research, teaching, committee work, and just had to like really grind it out. And I feel that actually gave me a significant advantage because I didn't have to stop, cook food, eat food, clean up. I mean, I could just sometimes just fast all day, pound out a lot of work, or eat a meal in the morning and then work all day and just eat dinner. And this was unheard of in the past because I was always carrying my food around with me. And you and Matt could probably relate to, especially in the world of bodybuilding. I would sort of panic if I went like 2 or 3 hours without eating.
Yeah.
So it was very liberating.
Yeah.
And logistically, it was very favorable. And I think this appeals to federal organizations like the military and NASA too. If you could free up more time for the operator, whether that be a special ops guy or out in the field, or an astronaut, which are under extremely high time demands for output, like stopping and eating. This throws a monkey wrench in a lot of things that they need to do. If they're doing an EVA, an extravehicular activity, if they're going outside of the space station or the shuttle, they might be tethered, out there working in space for, 5, 6, 8 to 10 hours. And if they get hungry, you can't really have a meal out there. So adapting your body to be resilient against limited food availability is a significant logistical advantage. And I think the military is starting to recognize that and recognize the benefits of being keto/fat adapted.